Hello everyone, this is Rifa and welcome to my Christmas spread series part 2. So I have uploaded a Christmas spread part 1 in the previous video. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And for the second part, I started with a very red house in the center, of course in a snow landscape. And I am doing this house in 2V watercolors. So I'll be doing the rest of elements in gouache. So if you are purchasing anything from 2V Arts website, you can use my code Fatima13 to get off on your next purchase, and also they are available on Amazon. You can check them out there too. So I have mentioned all the links in the description, you can check them out. So I have done the house and the tree first and then added the elements around it, but I haven't shown this particular house in the previous video because it is a separate spread, so I just thought of doing it in a separate video. So I have used my detailing brush to fill the entire space of the house because I have to leave spaces for my windows and doors, so it will be easier if I use a detailing brush. And I have filled the glass areas with a very dark brown and also added little line details to show that wooden cabinet effect. So while creating a spread for Christmas, always make sure about your color palette. I have chosen a red, brown, green and white color palette as I have mentioned in the previous video. So make sure you use a white and red combination everywhere in the Christmas spread. Another tip is to include a snow in your Christmas spread because it is to indicate the climate, which is winter during Christmas, and it would make that color combination more beautiful. So for snow I have added little gray contrast or shadows. So I'm leaving some white space to indicate that highlight, and then I added some bushes near house. So I applied a very light green shade and I made sure that the leaves of my bushes are pretty thin and narrow, so it would represent that bushes in a winter landscape. And then I added the darker tones. Gradually I added details using a darker green, and then I made the green more concentrated and added further details. So this is how we do in watercolors. We add the lightest color first and then add the darker tones above it. And I haven't let each layer dry while painting these bushes because I wanted to enjoy that flow of colors. I like that flow in certain cases. So I just darkened the windows and doors with some dark brown. I've added a little bit of black to the brown and did that contrast or shadows. And also I added a little circle handle for the door and again did some shadow works for the snow. And that's how the center snow landscape looks like. And then I did the sketching of all other elements and started painting. So I started with this bird, again a red black combination bird, but this is very different from my previous birds that I have added in the previous spread or previous page. So this bird has little gray part in it and it's very different. It's a bit more circular or round in shape, and I love that black details on the bird. And this bird is standing on a branch of cherry tree, so adding little cherries will also make that color combination look great. So for the part of the bird I added a very reddish orange, so to add the red part I added cherries on the trees hanging down. As I have mentioned earlier, I'm doing all these details and all these elements in Himimiya gouache now. So sometimes I use gouache like watercolors and sometimes I use them as acrylics, like starting from dark to light. So in this spread I'm using them little bit as watercolors. I just diluted it more and I started from light to dark. The next element I added was a little minimal Christmas hat, and I also added some of the leaves of the pine trees and some cherries so that I can fill this little space down here. So I started with a very light wash of green and added little line like leaves on the branch, and as usual I just made the wash a bit more concentrated or pigmented and added the shadow part. And then I did these cherries. I'm not that sure that if it's a cherry because it's red in color. I just love to call cherries. So I just left some white space to indicate that highlight on the cherry, so I don't need to add a white at the end. And then added little shadow and some black details at the tip of each cherry, and I also used black for the branches or the twig of the cherries. Then I added my favorite candy stick again. So in the previous page I added it in a mug of dessert, so I just thought of painting it separately this time. So as I have mentioned, I just love this swirl around it, this red swirl, and I like it so much. And for the shadows of the white part I use a very light gray, and I'm not overdoing it, I just let it be like that. And next element is a cup of coffee with some sugar cubes, and of course the cup is going to be red in color. So I just left some white space for the sugar cubes and some bubbles of the coffee and filled the entire area with brown color. Again you can see I'm using gouache like watercolors. I'm adding the lightest wash first and then add the darker tones and the shadows later. So I didn't over detailed the sugar cubes, I just added a little bit of shadow to it and that's it. And for the mug I painted a very bright red, the same red that I have used for the house, and I filled it with that shade. So this time for the highlights I'll be adding a light highlight over it because it is gouache, so I can do it as acrylic also, so I thought of doing it this way and added shadows using a dark red color. Since there is coffee, I thought of adding cookies also. So what is Christmas without some sweetness in it? So I just added a cookie with a red jelly heart in it and also a cookie in the shape of Christmas tree. So I've used yellow ochre for the base of the cookie and added little brown to add that shadows. And for the Christmas tree cookie I just used some white gouache paint to indicate that frosting or the piping design on the cookie. So this is not how I wanted my Christmas tree cookie to be, but it's okay, I just let it be like that. And what is Christmas without candles, of course? So I just added 2 little candles at the top right corner of the spread, and again added some very light wash of yellow ochre to detail these candles and left some spaces to add highlights, and also added the fire or the flame with some light yellow and orange, and as a deco I added little rose in the bottom part of the candles and some leaves and of course some cherries. So I just wanted to add that red detail somewhere in my each of elements, so I just added some red cherries and a red rose. So for the rose I just used a very loose watercolor technique to detail, and for the leaves I just started with a very light wash of green and added some dark shadows at the tip or at the starting of the leaves. Again, for the stem of the cherries I did black and also added some black details at the tip of the cherries. So I just detailed the entire rose and the leaves again with some darker tones so it would look more contrast and vibrant. And I'm never enough of this cake, so I just thought of adding a different cake on this spread also. Again, I added a cake, a very brown plum cake with some whipping cream melting down from it, or you can say white ganache, and some little cherries on the top. So I just made the cake in a very different shape than from the one that I did in the previous page. So added little brown wash first and then added the dark brown shadows. So you can see I have left some highlights for indicating that foldings of the cake. And yes, this is going to be the last element of the spread, and once it is complete, my Christmas spread is going to complete. So I was so excited at this stage, and I just love how it turned out in the end. I just love the color theme I used, the palette I used for this particular spread. And again, to add that green touch in some of the elements, I just did this cake in a green plate, and you can see I added little cherries at the top, and I have left some white space again to indicate that highlight. So if you don't want to do this like this, you can cover the entire cherry with red first and then added the highlights with white at the end, because it's gouache, and even if it's watercolor you can try that technique. You can use a white watercolor to add that highlight. And for the frosting I added little gray shadows and also added shadows for the cherries. And my Christmas spread is complete. So I'll be doing few more Christmas spread or Christmas paintings maybe, and I'll share them also, so stay tuned. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching.